since we visited with each other the last time, so much has happened. And I'm hoping to fill you in on some of those significant pieces. But I'll really start this conversation by emphasizing how important TSTN is to our organization, not only as individuals serving in your departments, but also as a group. And you probably are aware that we've really started working very intentionally, and we meet monthly with your executive. When I say we, I'm talking about the associate directors and myself, just so that we can continue to strengthen the shared leadership that we have together in the TDSB. I've been speaking about shared leadership since I arrived 3 years ago. I don't ever miss an opportunity to speak to that. But one of the things that's very important when you're speaking about shared leadership is you have to have a structure to actually do it. It doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you actually plan to share that leadership. And so I'm very grateful to the executive because now that we're meeting once a month, we're able to assist each other, learn from each other, and lead together. That is one of the reasons why you would have seen the email that went out to all of our departments saying, this organization is important, and these meetings are important. And all managers and supervisors out there in TDSB, be sure that you are absolutely supportive when someone in your department wants to be here. That's an example of a concrete action that emerged out of our shared leadership together. So I would be remiss if I did not start by thanking your executive for the amazing leadership that they provide. So can we give them a round of applause? And I know that as I continue to get to know our system over 3 years and the work that you do throughout our system, this group is a unique one in that you represent all aspects of our system. It's not like when I meet with principals who, even though there are 600 of them, they all are expected to do, frankly, the same thing in different local contexts. So I'm not suggesting that the job is the same in each school, but clearly the expectations are similar. So when I speak to a group of principals, it's very easy to be inclusive of everyone's experience because we're holding certain principles for all principals, P-L-E-S, for all 600 of them. When I'm addressing you, it's a little bit different because I know that the diversity of leadership that you're providing in the TDSB is part of what makes this organization great, but it's also part of what also causes some challenge. And the challenge comes from the fact that I'm hoping that the message that I share with you today is one that resonates regardless of the role that you play. So let me provide a little bit of insight into what has happened since we met the last time. I am grateful to our board, and as you know, our board will be shifting in a couple of weeks. We have 12 new trustees coming out of our 22, so it's a big shift. And some of the trustees that are retiring have been with the board for a very long time. So it is a time of change for us. But the board, the present board, left us with a very significant gift. And I've told this to them and I'm sharing it with you. Since amalgamation 20 years ago, our board has actually not officially passed a multi-year strategic plan until last May. The significance of that is there were strategic plans prior to last May, but they were staff-directed plans. And one of the things I've learned, this being my 10th year as a director, is that if we are not driven strategically by what our board is asking, we run the risk of being on two separate tracks. And when we're on two separate tracks, we all can figure out, and maybe you've experienced, what can happen. We're not on two separate tracks. The board has given a clear direction through the multi-year strategic plan, and in the month of October, senior team, after collaborating all over the system, has shared the action plans that we will be using with your assistance to move the multi-year strategic plan forward. It's monumental because now when we're asked to do something that doesn't fit within those parameters, I'm able to stand up and say, board, remember we have a direction that you passed, and this is what it is. And it's really important in order for us to be successful as we serve our students and we work collaboratively together. In order for us to be successful, we've got to stay with that plan. So what does this mean for you? High level, I hope you've seen it, I hope you've understood it, but the key drivers of our multi-year strategic plan are transforming student learning, creating a culture of well-being for students and staff. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Allocating resources strategically, especially because our resources are finite and the expectations are huge, and it's hard to manage those expectations across our big city. How do we do that strategically? Providing access to the programs and learning opportunities our students deserve, and building strong partnerships and relationships in order for us to move this strategic work forward. Every time I address you, I start by saying, please continue to work with one another in a way that allows you to find yourselves supporting student learning. I know that the roles in this room may be explicitly connected to students or not. We are exploring across many departments how, even if you are not through your role expected to be in schools, how might we connect you to schools from time to time so you can see, experience, and hear the purpose of our work? Let me tell you a simple story. You might know, if you follow Twitter, that I visit a couple of schools a week. And when I visit those schools, I share one aspect of what I've learned there. And as I look out at you, I think that I'm needing to add another piece to the work that I do, which is I find my way to your departments, which unfortunately I don't do enough of, so I can do the same thing with you. I see Carol in the back of the room. We're going to figure out how to do that. She's going to get worried about my calendar right now, but anyway, we'll figure it out. One of the things when I go to schools I do to keep myself focused, and I'm going to say that the place I appreciate the most is the kindergarten classroom. And if you've ever had the opportunity recently to be in a kindergarten classroom, if you don't get down on the floor, you're going to be pulled there. So down on the floor you go, and you ask the types of questions that allow 4-year-olds to say more than yes or no, or shake their head like this. Adults, I find, even sometimes those of us in education, I find that we ask the kinds of questions that don't allow our young people to generate a powerful, engaging, interesting response. However, I've been taught by a few really significant mentors that when you ask an open question that allows our wonderful young people to tell you what they think, what they believe, what they want to learn, and why they want to learn it, they will tell you. Even the shyest one, who puts their head down first until their friend says something to be sure that it's okay, they'll tell you who they are, what they believe, and what they hope for. And I don't know about you, but I'm going to make a guess. Even though we aren't in classrooms every day for the most part in this room, we'd be moved by that experience. Because what it does is it grounds us in our purpose. So again, I will emphasize, please, no matter what your role is, continue to find the connection to students, to student learning, and to the fact that we in this room create the conditions for that student learning to be effective. Next, let me focus on the significant aspect of well-being. You may recall that we engaged in a staff census last spring, and the information from that census is coming forward to the board in 2 weeks. And we got quite a bit of positive feedback from our staff, but there are also places that need some work. So I've committed to the leaders of all employee groups, including TSTN, that we're going to create a plan in response to that data collected through the staff census that will allow us to move the staff well-being piece forward. I don't need to tell you that we continue, it seems, to live in stressful times. If you've been studying or listening to a lot of the evidence that's emerging, anxiety is pretty heightened these days. And sometimes we might feel as though we don't have an ability to influence that we don't have the ability to change that. But some of you may know that, and it was shared in the introduction, that my previous training was actually in counseling, not in administration. And there's something that I learned from that particular background, and that is, there is quite a bit that we can do to enhance our well-being together. It doesn't mean that we can always assist where mental health challenges are on the table, and we might need to provide support for that, and we have many people in this room who are actually trained to assist us there. But all of us have a role to play. And these are some of the things that our census data spoke about. I certainly understand from my own experience, and I will work collaboratively with the employee groups, as I said, to create a plan. When we feel like we are contributing something that makes a difference, that is a key strength or enhancement to well-being. When we believe we have the voice to change a direction, that enhances well-being. When we come to work each day and we look forward to the people we're going to connect with, that enhances well-being. When we're working with supervisors, and maybe some of us in this room who are supervisors can reflect on this, who truly respect who we are and what we bring, that enhances well-being. We're a big organization. We're a complex organization. And sometimes we run the risk, as you've heard me say before, of being a bureaucratic organization. Forgive me that I keep certain themes. When I use that term, as I did last year and the year before, it simply means that the way we engage one another is too distant. How often have we unpacked a problem that took an hour, that had we picked up the phone instead of using the email may have taken 10 minutes? I'm just going to ask you to think about the last time you were engaged in an email conversation that clearly went off the rails. And if you picked up the phone, it might have been different. That's why the concept of service excellence is also part of our commitment to well-being. I've given only a few examples, but I'm hoping that in your own departments and on your own teams, you're able to reflect on how are you collectively and individually enhancing the well-being of the circle, of the community that you work with. You know, there are only so many things that we can do at system level. And that, again, is something I say to the trustees all the time, and you've heard me say to you. People expect systems to do things, and I'm responsible for this system. Thrilled to be, I feel very privileged to be here. But systems can't do it without the change happening where the real action is. The real action is not sitting at a boardroom table alone or at a senior team meeting alone. That's the hierarchical stuff. It's important. It has a place, but it's not where it happens. If I'm going to speak to the board in November about what was learned in our staff census related to well-being, and if I work with you collaboratively and the other employee groups to put something together that strategically works through that, the change doesn't happen at system level. It happens in your teams and departments. And that's why we are really focusing on where does change happen in TDSB? Classrooms, teams and departments, supported by a system, who has clear direction, who aligns resources effectively, and pays attention to and supports the greatest resource we have, which is you. Our greatest resource in this board are our human resources. Too often I hear we need more of this and we need more of that, fill in the blanks, in order to improve. And oftentimes this and that aren't human. And I'm going to ask you to think about that. Our greatest resources are us, in terms of serving our students and our families in our communities. So together, we need to figure out how to do that better, how to strengthen our commitment to each other's well-being more effectively, and how to share leadership, as I said earlier, in a way that truly makes a difference. Positional leadership has a certain feeling. When the person comes into the room, people think they need to act in a certain way, and when they leave the room, they act in a different one. I beg the people who work with me to just kind of put it on the table and don't allow me to be the only one who doesn't know what the truth is. But those of us who have leadership positions have to pay attention to the conditions we create. Because if we don't make it clear that we can be challenged, people aren't going to tell us the truth. That's part of the work we need to do together. Let me take you to the last piece that I want to share with you, and I know many of you have been involved in the introduction to our service excellence work that started a few years ago, and now you're probably aware we're taking it to the next level. So whenever I'm thinking about the multi-year plan, which I've described, the vision for learning and service continues to stay the same. You've heard me say it before. Shared leadership in an enhanced learning community. And by the way, we are a learning community too, not just the schools. And an enhanced learning community means there's trust, high expectations, and a sense of confidence that we can do the work effectively, leading to focused improvement. And you would have your own department and team plans regarding what the improvement needs to be, why, what evidence are you collecting to show that you are improving? And how are you learning from what you've collected in order to do things differently the next time? We'd like that cyclical process to happen in every department in school. Third, within that vision for learning is a significant commitment to leadership development. And within that, we'll be speaking about what school improvement looks like, and what service excellence looks like. It doesn't mean that the schools do not engage in service excellence, but in order for us to speak in a way that allows our schools to resonate, we're talking about the school improvement process. In order that we're speaking in a way that our service and business and operation departments can relate, we're using the language of service excellence so that we are standing at microphones or engaged in sessions or being in rooms and speaking in a way that hopefully makes sense to you. If I were to stand up here right now and speak about the school improvement process, you might be interested in it, but I understand that that's not the world you live in every day for the most part. Some of you do, but for the most part. And that's why we're going to speak about the concept of service excellence. It is a long-term vision. It is trying to get at the fact that historically, the feedback from our communities, as well as our internal stakeholders, not just external, is that we're not always that responsive in the work that we do. In a desire to create the kind of relationships that bring about change, and in order for us to be seen as a human organization that knows what relationships look like in a positive way, that understand what it means to respond when there's very little time some days, who understands that we have policy and procedure, and we must, but there are times when we have to actually think creatively because the implementation of that policy or procedure explicitly as written, though we always honor it and always respect it, might not always fit, which means your voice and experience has to influence potentially a change to that procedure. Staff owns procedure, board owns policy. We work together with the board on policy and procedure. If it needs a change to policy, it's a different process. A little bit more fulsome, but not impossible. If it needs a change to procedure, that's in our control. A human organization. That's what we continue to strive for. And by the way, it's already happening, but it needs to continue to happen more and more and more. Our Service Excellence program will continue to place at the foundation equity. We are continuing to talk about equity explicitly. Some people are telling me they're not comfortable with that, and I hear them, but we're not backing away. Equity is not something that simply sits on a poster as a word. It has to be an action. And in the TDSB, we're saying that that action is grounded in the commitment that as adults in the education field, we all carry bias. It's not a criticism. By acknowledging that bias and understanding how that bias might actually play out in our different workplaces, we could potentially, and this is our goal, remove barriers. Barriers that are formed because we may not even be aware of how the bias we hold is impacting the service we provide. Who gets a quicker response? Who doesn't? Whose voice do we respond to in a minute? Whose can wait? What decisions or what criteria drive that? And then what impact is it having? In our workplaces, how are we honoring, respecting, and celebrating the diversity of who we are? Do we reflect the Toronto community that we serve in terms of our culture and our background and our creed and so forth? Or not? And if not, what barriers have to be removed? Again, equity is the foundation of this work. Leadership and teamwork, second. Service delivery. In each and every one of your teams and departments, you know the work best. You know what will make it better. All that we're asking you to do is name that. Work at it. Collect evidence that you would best be able to determine and communicate broadly what's happened. We're going to celebrate service excellence because as I go around this system and meet not only school-based personnel but department personnel, we're already doing significant things that move this forward. So let's celebrate that. And last but not least, you've said it to me before, we have to spend more time in developing leadership. Not just the leadership of a formal position, but the leadership of each and every one of us. So that when we are in meetings, when we are problem solving, when we are engaging our public, when we are working together, it is meaningful, it is impactful, and it makes a difference. So you will be hearing, if you haven't heard already, that the next phase is to form service improvement teams across our system in departments. We're going to be bringing teams together. We're going to be ensuring that those who have leadership positions facilitate it, but don't own it. Again, everywhere I go, I say, this cannot simply be owned by whoever is the formal leader. It can't work that way. And then we're going to celebrate. We're going to celebrate the impacts that are happening, and we're going to celebrate the movements, the improvements going forward. In closing, I hope that when I speak about our board, who has passed a motion providing a strategic direction, our staff, who's worked collaboratively to put forward an action plan that will move the work to better places, never losing sight of the students that we serve, no matter what our role is, and understanding we cannot do anything significant alone. I hope that when I share it like that, and then we land it concretely in the place where every team and department must improve. But you have to determine what that improvement is. It can't come from some outside place. The only thing that the system must do is, when you've determined focus, when you've determined the evidence that you're going to collect, and when you sort out what actually happened based upon the work you're doing, we need to be accountable to that commitment. But not in a way that comes from somewhere else. If it isn't owned, it won't happen. That's another one of those human nature pieces that I'm sure you're aware of. Let me say that again. If you and I do not own the change that may be required to improve service, it won't happen. And that's why, in order for us to be the kind of human organization that we are and tend to strengthen in the TDSB, that's why this whole notion of ownership is so significant. Thank you again for all of your service. Thank you for inviting me to this event regularly. I will figure out other ways to connect with you. And I hope that as we kind of start this year, I know it's November, but it's still sort of the beginning of the year since it's my first time connecting with you. I hope you're feeling optimistic. And I hope you're feeling an energy. And I hope you're feeling an excitement that the work that we do together really matters. And there's nothing better than that. Thank you so much for your attention and time.